He learned to read, but not in his own language. He learned to write, but not his own name. In the late 19th century, as the Russian Empire expanded deep into Muslim lands from the Kazakh steppes to the ancient cities of Bukhara, Tashkent, and Kazan, the classroom became a battlefield. The empire no longer fought with swords, but with syllables. Arabic script was replaced by Cyrillic. The Quran was replaced by primers of loyalty to the Tsar. This is not just a story of education. It's a story of erasure and endurance, of how Muslim communities resisted the quiet violence of empire through faith, language, and learning. Welcome to Sands of History, where we uncover forgotten chapters of our world stories of culture, power, and resistance that shaped entire civilizations. If you find value in what we create, please like, share, and subscribe, and consider supporting us financially through the links in the description below. Your support keeps historical storytelling alive. When we think of colonialism, we often imagine armies, flags, and borders. But in the Russian Empire's conquest of Muslim lands, the true conquest began in the classroom. In places like Kazan, Tashkent, and Orenburg, Russian officials established schools where Muslim children were taught not the language of their ancestors, but the language of their conquerors. The goal was simple: to reshape identity, to sever a child's connection to their spiritual and cultural past, and to replace it with loyalty to the Tsar and the empire. As historian Adib Khalid wrote in Making Uzbekistan, education became the front line of empire. These words capture the essence of Russia's colonial mission, the belief that cultural domination could be achieved through pedagogy rather than force. The Imperial Mission. After conquering Central Asia in the 1860s and 1870s, the Russian Empire faced a question: how do you govern millions of Muslims whose faith, language, and customs differ from your own? Military rule alone was not enough. The answer lay in re-education. The empire introduced a system of Russo-native schools, Rusko-tuzemnie shkoly, government schools meant to civilize the local population. Children were instructed in Russian language, Russian history, and orthodox moral values. The Arabic script was often banned or discouraged, and Qur'anic education was portrayed as backward and superstitious. As Robert Cruz explains in For Prophet and Tsar, the classroom became a theater of empire, where loyalty to the Tsar was recited as a prayer. In these schools, Islam was not simply ignored, it was pathologized. Teachers described it as an obstacle to progress. The empire's goal was to produce Muslims who were obedient subjects, not devout believers. Resistance through knowledge, but empires rarely anticipate the resilience of faith. Across Central Asia and the Volga region, Muslim scholars known as ulama refused to let their traditions die. They built informal madrasas in homes, mosques, and even barns, teaching Arabic, Quran, and logic under the cover of darkness. Out of this resistance grew the Jadid movement, a reformist network of Muslim intellectuals who sought to modernize Islamic education on their own terms. They embraced modern sciences and geography, but within an Islamic framework, refusing to let the empire dictate the narrative. As Adib Khalid noted, the Jadids understood that the pen could be both a weapon and a shield. They printed newspapers in Turkic languages, established private schools that taught both Arabic and Russian, and wrote textbooks filled with pride in Muslim civilization. While the empire sought to create docile subjects, the Jadids produced critical thinkers and reformers, the future leaders of post-imperial Central Asia. The Language War. Language was the silent battlefield of empire. In Russian schools, Turkic and Persian languages were treated as primitive, unsuited for science or modern administration. Students were told that to be civilized, they must abandon their mother tongue. One Kazakh teacher in 1910 wrote bitterly, "They taught us to speak like them, so that we might forget how to speak to ourselves." In the Volga-Ural region, Tatars faced the same pressure. Their rich Arabic-Persian script was declared inefficient, and children were forced to learn Cyrillic. By the early 20th century, entire generations of Muslim youth could read Russian fluently, but struggled to read the Quran. As Adib Khalid observed, to master the Russian language was to cross the threshold into another civilization, one that demanded the surrender of the old self. Yet many Muslim families insisted their children study both, Russian by day, Arabic by night. The home became a hidden classroom, a quiet act of defiance, the Soviet continuation. The fall of the Tsarist Empire in 1917 did not end the cultural war, it transformed it. Under the Soviet Union, education became even more centralized and ideological. While the Soviets claimed to liberate Central Asians from Tsarist oppression, they continued the same mission: to build a new human being, atheist, rational, and loyal to Moscow. Arabic script was abolished in 1927, replaced first with Latin, then with Cyrillic. The Quran was banned from schools, and thousands of teachers who resisted were imprisoned or executed during Stalin's purges. As one Uzbek reformer lamented, quoted by Khalid, "They gave us letters without soul and knowledge without God." The Soviet classroom thus completed what the Tsarist project had begun, not merely teaching facts, but re-engineering belief. Cultural survival. And yet, despite a century of forced education, Islam and identity survived. In secret, families whispered verses of the Quran to their children. Grandmothers taught the Arabic alphabet from embroidered cloths. Folk songs and poetry carried the memory of the faith when books could not. As historian Adib Khalid writes, even in silence, the Muslim world of the empire continued to learn not from the empire's schools, but from its own memory. After the Soviet collapse in 1991, there was a massive revival of Islamic learning. Madrasas reopened, Arabic script returned in textbooks, and imams once again taught openly. But the scars of linguistic and spiritual colonization remain. The loss of script meant the loss of access to centuries of Islamic scholarship, a wound still healing today. A wider lesson. This story is not only about Russia. It is about every empire that used education as a tool of domination, from the British in India to the French in Algeria. Education can enlighten, but under empire it can also enslave. The Russian case shows how deeply colonial power understood that to rule the body, one must first capture the mind. As Robert Cruz wrote, the Tsar's teachers became missionaries of empire, preaching civilization while silencing belief. Yet history also teaches us that resistance often begins in the same place, the classroom, the pen, the word. The very tools used for control became instruments of revival when reclaimed by the colonized. Conclusion. The story of forced Russian education in Muslim lands is a story of erasure, but also of endurance. It reminds us that knowledge, when controlled by empire, becomes a weapon. But when reclaimed by the people, it becomes freedom. Today, the descendants of those students continue to rediscover their lost languages, their forgotten books, their silenced prayers. The empire that sought to rewrite their history is gone, but the written word, the Quran, and the memory of their scholars endure. If you found this story meaningful, please like, share, and subscribe to Sands of History, where we bring you forgotten voices and stories from across the world. You can also support us financially through the links in the description. Your help allows us to continue producing deep, thoughtful storytelling. Thank you for watching. Until next time, keep questioning, keep remembering, and keep learning.